The maned wolf followed the grass line because it was the only thing in the campo that admitted change. The grass did not end cleanly. It thinned, bent, recovered, then bent again, shaped by wind that crossed the plateau without obstruction. Tall blades leaned in the same direction for long stretches, then suddenly stood upright where the land dipped or where scrub interrupted the flow. To most eyes, it was just vegetation responding to weather. To the maned wolf, it was information. He moved parallel to the line, not inside it, not fully outside it either, keeping his long legs clear of the densest growth while staying close enough to read what had passed. His body was tall and narrow, rust-red coat broken by black stockings on his legs, and a dark mane that lifted slightly when the wind pressed against him. His ears rose above the grass, always visible, always turning. The Cerrado was quiet in the way open places were quiet, full of sound but lacking focus. Wind rushed, insects buzzed, far-off birds called without urgency, nothing announced itself sharply. That was why the grass mattered. The wind bent it flat ahead of him in slow waves like a hand smoothing fabric. Where the wind pressed evenly, scent lifted early and scattered quickly. Where the grass resisted, standing taller, thicker, smell lingered. The wolf slowed. He lowered his head and tasted the air. There it was. Rodent, recent, moving cautiously. The scent did not sit low. It lifted and tore apart as the wind passed, forcing him to read fragments instead of a trail. This was normal here. The Cerrado did not offer straight answers. He adjusted his path, angling slightly upslope where the grass leaned less and the wind lost some of its force. His steps were careful but unhurried, paws placing lightly, barely parting stems. The grass line curved ahead, marking a shallow depression where moisture lingered longer after rain. That was where life gathered, briefly, unevenly. The maned wolf followed. He was alone. Maned wolves almost always were. They did not form packs. They did not chase together. They did not need company to function. The land here rewarded separation. Too many bodies meant too much noise, too much competition for food that arrived in small, unpredictable portions. He hunted differently than other canids. He did not run prey down. He listened. He paused. He struck vertically. The grass line marked places where sound changed, where rustle turned into scrape, where small movements betrayed themselves against flattened blades. He stopped near a patch where the grass lay pressed flat in a rough oval. Something had rested there. He sniffed. Armadillo? No. Too heavy. Deer mouse? Possibly. Wolf's apple fruit crushed nearby. Sweet, green, split open by something feeding earlier. He noted it all and moved on. Food here came from many directions. Fruit mattered as much as flesh. Insects filled gaps between larger meals. Survival was additive, not singular. Far off, a shape broke the horizon. Human. A man stood near a fence line, hat pulled low, leaning against a post while watching cattle graze. The animals moved slowly, heads down, tearing grass in long, patient motions. Their hooves pressed lines into the soil that the wind could not erase. The maned wolf saw the human long before the human saw him. He did not freeze. Freezing made silhouettes sharper here. Instead, he continued walking, keeping the grass between them, his red coat dissolving into colour and motion. Distance mattered more than concealment. The wind bent the grass again, flattening it in broad strokes. The wolf felt the air shift across his chest and mane. Scent changed direction suddenly, rolling back toward him. Cattle, human sweat, oil, metal, nothing dangerous yet. He kept moving. As midday approached, heat pressed down. The wind did not stop, but it lost its cool edge, becoming dry and heavy. Grass responded differently now, less flexible, slower to rise after bending. The line the wolf followed sharpened, easier to read. He paused again. The grass ahead shivered where nothing visible moved. His ears snapped forward. A rodent burst from cover and sprinted across the flattened blades, its body cutting a brief clear path. The wolf reacted instantly, not by chasing, but by leaping. He came down hard, forepaws striking together, pinning. The sound was brief and final. He lifted his head immediately, scanning. No response from the land. He ate quickly, swallowing most of it whole, then licked his paws clean. The meal was small, but it mattered. He resumed following the grass line. By afternoon, clouds gathered low on the horizon. Not rain yet, just promise. Wind shifted, bending the grass in conflicting directions. Lines overlapped, erased, rewrote themselves. The maned wolf adjusted constantly. He crossed the line once, then again, testing which side told clearer stories. He paused often, letting the wind finish what it was doing before committing to a direction. This was where many animals failed, moving too soon, trusting patterns that were already changing. The wolf waited. When the wind flattened the grass suddenly and completely, pressing it low for several long seconds, he moved forward decisively. The land revealed something then. A narrow path pressed into soil beneath the grass, not made by cattle or people, but by repeated small movements. A burrow network nearby. He followed the subtle line, stopped, listened. Scratch, pause, scratch again. He struck with precision, digging just enough to expose movement, snapping quickly. Another small meal. Enough. As evening approached, the wind softened. Grass began to stand again, losing the sharp clarity it had offered all day. Scent settled closer to the ground. Sound softened. The grass line blurred. The maned wolf slowed. This place had told him what it could. He lifted his head and looked out across the open cerrado, rolling grass, scattered trees, distant hills dissolving into haze. The human and cattle were gone now, moved toward water and shelter. The land returned to itself. The wolf turned away from the grass line and trotted toward a patch of shrubs where fruiting plants grew. He would feed there before night, balance flesh with sweetness, listen again in darkness when the wind behaved differently. Behind him, the grass rose slowly, undoing the day's patterns. The wind had bent it flat. He had read it while it stayed honest. And when it lifted again, when the line dissolved back into randomness, he moved on without hesitation, carrying the lesson forward into a landscape that never offered the same truth twice. The maned wolf returned to the grass line when the air changed its mind. Evening in the cerrado did not announce itself with shadow alone. It arrived first in the wind. What had rushed and pressed all day began to hesitate, moving in uneven pulses that bent the grass halfway and then let it rise again. Direction became uncertain. Smell stopped tearing itself apart and started to gather, low and cautious. The wolf felt it before he saw anything different. His pace slowed. This was the hour when mistakes were easiest to make, not because the land was hostile, but because it offered half answers. The grass no longer flattened cleanly. It leaned, then twisted, then stood back up in confusion. Lines overlapped and contradicted one another. The maned wolf did not abandon the grass line. He refined it. He walked closer now, long legs threading between stems, chest brushing seed heads that released faint clouds of pollen and dust. His ears rose even higher, catching the softer sounds that returned as wind lost dominance. The click of insects, the faint rustle of bodies moving below grass height, the distant bark of another maned wolf far beyond his range. That sound mattered, not because it was a threat, but because it fixed distance. He answered once, a low single bark that carried flat and wide across the open land, then stopped. No escalation followed. Territory acknowledged, not challenged. The air settled again. The wolf paused where the grass dipped into a shallow basin barely visible in daylight. Here, moisture lingered longer. Soil held tracks more honestly. Smell behaved predictably. The grass leaned inward slightly, forming a loose bowl. He stepped inside. The temperature dropped noticeably, just enough to cool his pads and slow his breathing. He lowered his head and inhaled deeply. Fruit. Ripe. Wolf's apple. split open, recently fed on. He scanned the area. The fruit lay scattered, not piled. Seeds spread wide. Feeding had been brief and interrupted. Another manned wolf? Possibly, but the scent was wrong. Lighter, more erratic, hoofed, a pampas deer perhaps, feeding opportunistically before moving on. The wolf ate one fruit slowly, crushing it between molars, swallowing the pulp and seeds. Sweetness mattered here. It balanced hunger without cost. As he fed, he listened. The grass whispered again. Not wind. Movement. A tinamou burst from cover suddenly, wings beating hard, body lifting just enough to escape. The wolf sprang reflexively, but stopped mid-motion. Too late. Too loud. He stood still, letting the bird vanish without pursuit. Energy saved mattered more than energy spent. Darkness arrived fully. Stars sharpened. The sky opened. With night, the wind changed again. It returned, but lower, cooler, sliding through grass rather than over it. This bent stems close to the ground instead of flattening them entirely. Sound softened. Smell pooled. The grass line transformed. What had been a visual guide became a tactile one. The wolf read it now with his legs and chest, feeling where stems brushed more heavily, where gaps opened unexpectedly. He followed the line again, not straight, but in shallow curves, testing pockets of information. He stopped abruptly. The grass ahead lay bent in a narrow corridor, not by wind, but by repeated passage. Something larger than a rodent. Not cattle, not human. A hare. The scent was fresh, warm, concentrated. The wolf shifted his weight backward slightly, ears locking forward, eyes fixed on a point where the corridor vanished into standing grass. He waited. Minutes passed. Then a twitch. The hare broke cover and ran. The wolf reacted instantly, leaping high, coming down hard in the grass where the hare would be, not where it was. The impact stunned. The wolf followed with a quick bite. The grass absorbed the sound. He lifted his head immediately, listening for response. None came. He ate where he stood, tearing efficiently, swallowing large pieces. Blood darkened his muzzle briefly, then vanished as he licked clean. The grass line bent under his weight, then rose again behind him. Later in the night, clouds thickened. Wind dropped almost completely. This was the most dangerous stillness. Without wind, scent lay heavy and close. Sound travelled farther. The wolf moved more cautiously now, choosing routes where grass remained tall enough to break his outline. Far off, headlights flared briefly on a distant road, then disappeared. Humans still moved. The wolf acknowledged it and continued. He did not approach the road. He did not need to. The grass line curved away from it naturally, guiding him back toward deeper interior ground, where shrubs clustered and insects rose thick from the soil. Before leaving the open, he stopped one last time and looked back across the campo. In the starlight, the grass line was barely visible now, only a subtle difference in texture, a memory of pressure rather than a shape. It had served its purpose. The wind had bent it flat once. The air had lifted its secrets briefly. Now it closed again. The manned wolf turned and trotted toward denser cover, long legs moving with effortless economy, ears still high, reading a world that never repeated itself. Tomorrow, another line would form somewhere else, and he would find it, not by sight alone, but by knowing exactly when the land stopped being honest and started asking for patience instead. Dawn reached the corrado slowly, as if unsure whether it was welcome. Light did not spill across the grass all at once. It collected first on the highest blades, catching dew and turning it briefly into scattered points of white. Lower down, shadow lingered, pressed close to the ground where the night had settled its weight. The manned wolf stood still and watched the change. He had not slept deeply. He rarely did in open country. Instead, he had rested in pieces, head lowering, body easing, ears never fully relaxing. When the first shift in light came, he rose without urgency and walked back toward the grass line he had left the night before. It was still there, but it was no longer the same. Where the wind had flattened the grass cleanly the previous day, the stems now stood unevenly, bent in conflicting directions by night air, by the passage of small animals, by nothing at all. Dew weighed them down, blurring the sharpness that had once told such clear stories. The line had softened. The wolf stepped closer and let his legs brush through the stems. They slid against his fur without resistance, cool and damp. Scent behaved differently now, pressed downward by moisture, pooling low, unwilling to lift. He lowered his head and inhaled. Rodent trails remained, but old. The hare's path was gone, erased by night movement and settling grass. Fruit scent lingered faintly, diluted and spread. Nothing rose to meet him. The grass no longer spoke first. He walked along the line anyway, not because he expected it to reveal something new, but because abandoning information too early was as dangerous as trusting it too long. The land ahead looked open and quiet. Birds resumed their morning calls cautiously, starting and stopping as if testing whether sound was safe again. Insects lifted from the grass in short, uncertain bursts. The wolf moved at a slow walk. His long legs gave him height above the stems, but height did not grant advantage now. Visibility was even. No flattening revealed movement. No wind pressed patterns into the ground. The grass was standing for itself again. That meant prey would move differently, less exposed, more confident. He adjusted. Where he had hunted by listening for sudden displacement before, he now watched for imbalance. A patch of grass moving against the weight of dew, a stem shaking where no breeze passed. He paused often, letting the morning finish assembling itself before acting. This patience was not hesitation, it was maintenance. Far to the south, a tractor started. The sound was distant but unmistakable. A low mechanical vibration that travelled through the ground more than the air. The wolf lifted his head and held still until the noise settled into the background. Humans were awake now. That mattered. Human movement reshaped wind, noise, and scent long before it arrived physically. Roads would wake, cattle would be driven, dogs would run briefly and be called back. The grass line would not survive that. The wolf turned slightly away from it, angling toward a stretch of cerrado where shrubs rose in uneven clusters and fruiting plants broke the uniformity of grass. Here, the land offered vertical cover again. Here, scent pooled honestly beneath leaves and branches. He left the line behind without looking back. Mid-morning heat arrived quickly. Dew burned away. Grass lifted fully, shaking free the last of the night's weight. What had once been a readable boundary dissolved into sameness, just field, wind, and distance. The wolf fed once more before the day grew too loud. He found a cluster of fallen fruit beneath a small tree, sweet and overripe, and ate slowly, methodically. The meal was quiet, unchallenged. He lay down in the shade afterward, body stretched long, chest rising and falling evenly. From here he could still see the open campo, but it no longer demanded his attention. The grass line was gone, or rather, it had returned to being just grass. By the time the sun climbed high enough to flatten shadows, the wind returned, but not with purpose. It moved without direction, stirring the field randomly, offering no patterns worth following. The maned wolf rose and began to travel again, leaving the area entirely, long legs carrying him toward another part of the plateau where moisture, wind, and ground would arrange themselves differently. He did not regret leaving. Places that stopped telling the truth were not failures. They were simply finished. Behind him, the cerrado stretched wide and indifferent, the grass standing tall and uniform once more, betraying nothing. The wind had bent it flat once. He had read it while it stayed honest. Now it stood again, unmarked, unreadable, and no longer useful. The wolf moved on, not searching for the same line, but for the next moment when land, air, and movement would align just long enough to be understood. And when that happened, he would be there, listening before the grass bent, watching before it rose, leaving before it forgot what it had briefly revealed,